What if your memories are not limited to this life? What if forgetting was the very first condition of being born? Your life was written before you took your first breath, and it is still being written now, not by fate, not by random chance, but by a field of consciousness so vast, so ancient, that it remembers everything your soul has ever done, ever felt, ever dreamed. There is a place, if you can even call it a place, that holds every thought you have ever had, every intention you have ever carried, every karmic imprint from every life you have ever lived. It is not loud, it is not obvious. It is silent, so silent that most people never hear it. It is subtle, so subtle that most never sense it. And yet, it is always there, just beyond the veil of ordinary awareness. You have felt it before, in the stillness of deep meditation, in the strange, sudden clarity of déjà vu, in those dreams that feel more real than your waking life. The ancients called it Akasha. Mystics knew it without needing a name. Today, we call it the Akashic Records. But make no mistake, this is not a fantasy for the spiritually curious. This is not a metaphor or a comforting illusion. It is the architecture behind your entire reality. And once you begin to see it, you will never see yourself the same way again. There is a reason you sometimes feel like your life is a chapter in a book you never got to start from the beginning. Like you were dropped into the middle of a story with no memory of the pages that came before. That feeling is not imagination. It is not confusion. It is intuition. Something deep within you knows. Your soul has lived far more than this one life, and the record of those lives never vanished. They have been waiting for you to remember. The record has a name. It has been whispered across continents, traditions, and time. The Akashic Records. They are not a book. They are not something you can hold in your hands or find on a shelf. They are not physical. They are not locked away in a temple or buried beneath ancient stone. They do not belong to a religion or a single belief system. They exist in a dimension beyond time, beyond space, a living, non-physical field of consciousness that holds memory the way the ocean holds waves. It is a vibrational archive, not just of your actions, but of your thoughts, your feelings, your intentions, every decision you have ever made, every lesson you were meant to learn, every lifetime you have lived. And it is not just about you. Every soul, every being, every experience. It is all there. This is not a privilege for the chosen few. This is the very terrain of consciousness itself. The word Akashic comes from the ancient Sanskrit word Akasha, which means ether or spirit. In the cosmology of ancient India, it was considered the fifth element, beyond earth, water, fire, and air. Akasha was not a metaphor. It was the invisible thread that holds all of existence together. The subtle, energetic substance from which all form emerges. And the records are what that field remembers. This understanding is not new. Versions of it exist in nearly every mystical tradition. The Hebrews spoke of the Book of Life. The ancient Egyptians believed in a Hall of Records. In Islam, it is called the Al-Law al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet that records all things. In the West, spiritual thinkers like Helena Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner spoke of a memory field that transcends our five senses. They were not inventing something new. They were remembering something old, something timeless, something your soul has always known. If you have ever felt a fear that had no name, a gift you could never explain, or a sorrow too deep for this lifetime, you are not broken. You are remembering. You are feeling echoes from somewhere beyond logic, somewhere older than thought. Echoes from the records. You are not just your current story. You are a soul carrying layers of experience, stacked like pages in a book written across time. And those layers are not random. They are patterns, themes, unfinished lessons moving through you, waiting to be seen. Until you become aware of them, they continue to play out, subtly, powerfully, unconsciously, lifetime after lifetime. But the moment you begin to witness the pattern, everything changes. The records are not just an idea. They are not a metaphor for reflection. They are a key, a map, a compass, and they always point in one direction, back to yourself. Inside that map are answers, not surface answers, not answers meant to impress anyone, but answers that rearrange you from the inside, answers about who you have been and who you are becoming. There are insights waiting to be heard, lessons waiting to be integrated, and one truth that most people never get close enough to touch. Your purpose is not something you invent. It is something you remember. Most people never even try to access this field, not because they cannot, but because they were never told it was possible, because someone, somewhere, decided it was safer to keep you convinced that all knowledge comes from books, from institutions, from outside yourself. But the records say otherwise. They say the highest knowledge is not learned. It is recalled, remembered in the stillness, pulled from within, not taught by someone else, unlocked by your own resonance. You do not need a title. You do not need a robe or a ritual. You do not need permission. You need sincerity, intention, readiness. So the real question is not whether you can access the records. The real question is, what happens when you do? Long before the term Akashic Records ever existed, there were those who knew. Not through belief, but through experience. Visionaries, mystics, seers, and sages who touched something beyond the veil and brought back what could not be written in words. What they received was not language. It was truth, pure, vibrational, undeniable. They did not read it, they felt it, in their bones, in their silence, in the spaces where thought could not reach. Across continents and cultures, they spoke of a realm, not guarded by walls, but by frequency, where the memories of the soul are kept. They gave it different names, different symbols, but they all knew the same thing. There is a place, if it can even be called a place, that remembers everything. The Vedic rishis spoke of Akasha as the primal substance of reality, the source of all form and all thought. To them, nothing was ever truly lost. Everything returned to Akasha, like a ripple folding back into the ocean. Tibetan mystics called it the mind stream, a flow of consciousness beyond individual lifetimes. The Druids, the Egyptians, the Gnostics, the Mayans, they all had their own language for it. But the knowing was the same. So what happened to that knowing? It did not vanish. It was dismantled, silenced, rebranded as myth or madness by systems that feared what it could awaken. Because if the soul has memory, then identity is not limited to nationality, religion, or biology. If the records are real, then authority is not external. It is internal. And that is a dangerous truth to any structure built on control. Colonization did not just take land. It took memory. It outlawed ceremonies that opened intuitive channels to the field. It mocked oral traditions. It burned libraries. It demonized earth-based wisdom and replaced it with dogma. It rewrote the very history of the soul. Even now, in the age of data and science, the records are dismissed as pseudoscience or fantasy, yet the same critics cannot explain why some children remember lives they never lived, why strangers share identical dreams, why ancient texts from opposite ends of the earth describe the same unseen place in language too precise to ignore. It is not that the evidence is missing, it is that it does not serve the narrative. Because a world built on consumption and obedience cannot thrive if people begin asking, who was I before this name, before this body, before this story? And what if the story I was told is not the full story? What if the forgetting was not an accident? What if it was the first lesson in how to be controlled? And what if the reason you are still listening right now is because part of you already remembers? You do not need permission to remember, not from a teacher, not from an institution, not from any spiritual hierarchy. The Akashic Records were never meant to be owned. They were never meant to be hidden behind robes or rituals. They were meant to be felt, to be lived, to be remembered in the quiet places inside you, where truth still breathes. This is not a library of books. It is not a place you walk into. It is a frequency, a field, a resonance that responds not to intellect, but to alignment. You do not read the records. You tune to them, like a radio finally landing on a clear signal after years of static. You do not study them. You feel them move through you. They are not written in ink, but in vibration. People have been accessing this field for thousands of years, long before it had a name. It happens in moments of deep meditation, when time dissolves, in dreams that feel older than this life, in visions that arrive without warning, in grief so still that something eternal steps forward, in joy so overwhelming that the soul finally speaks. The entry point is always the same: presence, not force, not effort, not control. You cannot muscle your way into the records. You soften, you surrender, you quiet the noise until what was always whispering becomes impossible to ignore. What the records contain is not information the way you are used to it. It is not paragraphs, not instructions. It is knowing. It is memory without narrative. Sometimes it arrives as a feeling you cannot explain. A symbol, a sound, a sudden inner recognition that makes no sense to your mind, but total sense to your soul. That is the language of the records. Modern seekers use many tools to reach this space: guided meditations, pathway prayers, automatic writing, breath work, lucid dreaming, astral projection, plant medicine, silence, stillness. Article: there is no single method, no single formula, because the field does not care how you enter. It cares why. Intention is everything. If you approach seeking control, validation, or entertainment, you will likely find nothing. But if you arrive with reverence, with curiosity, with the courage to be changed, the field responds. And it does not flatter. The records do not give you what your ego wants. They give you what your soul is ready to see: patterns, loops, wounds you have carried through lifetimes, truths you have avoided, but also power, ancient power, the kind that does not shout but waits, the kind that feels like a remembering, not a discovery. They reveal clarity where confusion has lived for years, and they whisper what the world tried to make you forget. You are more than you have been told. You always were. You just needed to slow down long enough to hear it. What if you have already touched the records and just did not know it? That moment when your intuition stopped you from saying yes to something that felt wrong, even when your mind could not explain why. That instant, you felt pulled to a place, a person, or a path that had no logical reason but felt like home. That flash of knowing, of recognition, of remembering. Those were not coincidences. They were echoes, brief openings in the veil, the Akashic field, whispering beneath the noise of everyday life. You were not imagining it. You were accessing it. Accessing the records is not about leaving this world behind. It is about arriving fully into it. It is not a spiritual escape. It is a homecoming, a returning to the part of you that never forgot, the part that does not need proof, the part that feels what is true before the mind can name it. You do not just remember who you were. You begin to embody who you came here to be. That kind of memory does not sit quietly in the background. It moves you. It reorders your direction. It changes the energy behind your choices. It clarifies your voice. It expands your perception of others. It shifts your story from survival into sovereignty. And once you have touched that infinite field, once you have felt yourself mirrored by something eternal, something vast and alive, you cannot go back to believing you are small. You cannot unknow your own power. You cannot shrink yourself into someone else's version of your life. Because now your soul remembers. And once it does, the only question left is, will you live like someone who knows, or keep searching like someone who forgot? You did not come here empty. You did not arrive in this lifetime as a blank slate, randomly tossed into a world of chaos. You came with a blueprint, a soul-level design, shaped by lifetimes of experience, intention, and consequence. And the Akashic Records hold that blueprint, not as a story etched in stone, but as a living frequency, shifting with your choices and your willingness to evolve. This blueprint is not just information about who you have been. It maps the energetic imprint of every moment your soul has lived. Some call it karma, others call it memory. But at its core, it is the architecture of your spiritual evolution. Karma is one of the most misunderstood ideas in the modern world. It is not punishment. It is not cosmic payback. Karma is resonance. Karma is momentum. Karma is unfinished energy looking for completion. It is like a song you started in another life that still wants to resolve. And until it does, the same melody plays in different forms. If you betrayed someone in a past life, you may feel an overwhelming urge to protect others in this one. If you silenced your truth again and again, you may now feel called to speak, even when your voice shakes. These are not random traits. They are soul patterns, threads woven through time, creating continuity in your deeper story. And then there are soul contracts, not rigid scripts, not fixed destinies, but sacred agreements made before you incarnated. Agreements to meet certain people, face certain challenges, learn certain lessons. That heartbreak you could never explain. That toxic relationship you kept returning to. That mentor who appeared at the exact moment you were ready. These were not accidents. They were activations. Because when you remember your blueprint, your struggles begin to make sense. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this teaching me? You begin to notice the repetition, the patterns, the disguised lessons, the same heartbreak wearing a new face, the same fear with a different name, the same self-sabotage in a different disguise. But once you see the pattern, you gain the power to break it. Because awareness is the first disruption, and choice, made with full consciousness, becomes the seed of transformation. You are not bound by your past. You are not trapped in your karma. You are the one who can complete the cord. You are the one who can close the contract. The records do not dictate your fate. They simply reveal what you are ready to rewrite. There is something profoundly sacred about seeing your gifts not as random talents, but as echoes of a soul that has traveled far. While most people focus on the wounds of past lives, the truth is that wisdom travels too. Talents, strengths, instincts, and even spiritual abilities often return through the veil. That deep pull toward healing, teaching, or creating is rarely new. It is a continuation, a remembering, a signal that your soul has mastered this frequency across lifetimes. The records do not just show you where the pain began. They show you where the power lives. That power may have been misunderstood, ignored, or even shamed in this lifetime. Perhaps you were told you were too sensitive, too intense, too much. But what the world rejected may be exactly what your soul refined over centuries of becoming. When you see your gifts through the lens of your soul's blueprint, something inside you softens. You stop trying to match anyone else's timeline. You stop measuring your worth against someone else's path, because now you understand that no one else carries your exact code. Your talents are not decorations. They are blueprints unfolding themselves through you. They are not meant to fit the mold. They are meant to break it. And when you stop comparing, you begin to honor your own process. You stop rushing. You stop blaming. You start trusting that your timing is sacred, that your delays are not failures. They are alignments. Your challenges are not obstacles. They are activations. The Akashic Records reveal the soul's curriculum, and once you see it, your greatest struggles begin to feel like sacred assignments. Your setbacks are no longer signs of being behind. They become signs that your soul is preparing you to remember something ancient, something powerful, something only you can embody. You are not late. You are not lost. You are right on time for the exact moment your soul chose to awaken its next gift. You do not need to be gifted. You do not need to be psychic. You do not need crystals or rituals or mantras whispered under moonlight. To access the Akashic Records, you only need presence. You need the kind of silence that is not the absence of sound, but the absence of noise within you. A stillness that does not demand results. A quiet that is not empty, but full of listening. The records are not hiding. They are humming, always. But they do not compete with your thoughts. They do not shout above your doubt. They do not barge into your mind with flashing answers. They wait, patiently, lovingly, until you are soft enough to let go of performance, still enough to feel instead of think, honest enough to want truth more than the story you have wrapped yourself in, because that is what the records reveal. Not a fairy tale, not a drama, not a narrative that makes you the victim or the hero. They reveal what liberates you. They show you the patterns that bind you, the truths you resisted, the soul you abandoned, trying to become acceptable. They will not flatter you. They will not flatter your wounds. They will only show you what brings you home. And that is why most people never hear them. Not because they lack the gift, but because they are still addicted to their image. They are still loyal to their pain. They are still more in love with being right than being free. The records do not judge that, but they do not meet you in illusion. They meet you in resonance. And the moment you choose to be still, to feel, to remember, they begin to respond. Not with words, but with frequency, with knowing, with a presence so ancient and precise that something in your body says yes before your mind can explain it. You have always had access, not through effort, through attunement, through returning to the version of you that no longer needs proof, only presence. That is where the records live. Not in a book, not in the stars, but in the stillness that knows, in the part of you that already remembers. Maybe you were never meant to chase the future. Maybe the future you are chasing is a projection built from wounds, not wisdom. Maybe you are not here to accumulate more, fix more, achieve more, but to remember what you came to embody, the essence that was never broken, the truth that was never lost, only buried beneath roles, reactions, and survival masks. Alignment is not about stacking new skills on top of old wounds. It is not about becoming someone impressive. It is about removing what was never you, the expectations you inherited, the shame you swallowed, the roles you played to feel safe. And sometimes, the most spiritual thing you can do is not meditate harder, manifest faster, or push yourself through another transformation. Sometimes, it is deleting the version of yourself that was built in fear, the version stitched together from coping and pretending and proving, because beneath that version is not a blank slate. It is the one you were born to be, the one who breathes differently, walks differently, chooses from clarity instead of urgency, speaks from stillness instead of fear, loves from presence instead of performance. That self is not created. That self is remembered. So stop trying to upgrade your illusion. Begin the holy task of subtracting. Let go of the noise that promised safety. Grieve the identities that kept you hidden. And in the quiet that follows, you will meet yourself again, not as a goal, not as a fantasy, but as a frequency, one that cannot be taken, copied, or misunderstood, one that was always there, waiting to be lived.